8 years, Sarah clipped coupons, saved bus fare, and lived like she was one emergency away from losing everything. Her husband mocked her for being ordinary, never realizing she was sitting on a legacy powerful enough to change her entire life. After the divorce, she returned to her grandmother's old house in Oregon, expecting dust, loneliness, and broken memories. Instead, a lawyer revealed the truth, a hidden trust, protected money, and millions that had been waiting for her all along. Her ex left because he thought she was worthless. That mistake would ruin him.
I left town after he traded me for a junior assistant. My uncle spilled my secret at their gala and regretted it fast. Hey everyone, thanks for joining. Drop your city in the comments. Where are you watching from? Let us set the scene. The heavy glass doors of the steakhouse hit me with the scent of searing meat and old leather. It once felt like celebration. Tonight, it felt like a funeral. I walked to the corner booth where Mark proposed 10 years ago. I booked it for our final dinner. I needed closure. I wanted to look the man I gave my youth to in the eye and say goodbye with dignity. But dignity was off the menu. He was 20 minutes late. He looked like he owned the place, wearing the silk suit I bought him. Polished and completely checked out. He sat down without a word, eyes glued to his phone, a smug grin played on his lips. I knew who was messaging Brenda, his 20-year-old assistant, who called him boss. I ordered the wine you love, I said, voice shaking. And the steak, medium rare. Mark finally looked up, scanning the room for anyone important. Yeah, fine, he muttered, downing the wine. Let us make this fast, Sarah. I have plans. Plans with her, I asked. He laughed. With Brenda, yeah, we are planning the wedding. She wants a winter theme, huge. Unlike that cheap party we had, his words cut deep. Our wedding was tiny because I put every dime into his startup. We were building a future. Mark, that party was all we could afford since I paid your office rent. Look where that got me, he sneered, finally locking eyes. No warmth left, just cold arrogance. I am a founder now, Sarah. I need a partner with that energy. Brenda is vibrant. She wants things. She knows how to treat a winner. He leaned in, voice dropping to a hiss. You are just tired. You smell like laundry and hard work. You remind me of the struggle, and I am finished with it. I gripped my napkin until my knuckles turned white. 10 years. I worked double shifts and did freelance work at night so he could build his company. I cooked, cleaned, and soothed his ego. Now, I was just a reminder of the grind. I gave you everything, I whispered. I dropped out of art school for you. That was your choice, he shrugged, checking his watch. Stop playing the victim. You never had the drive. Brenda has drive. She is helping me rebrand. She is the future. You are history. The waiter arrived. The food that once smelled delicious now made me nauseous. Mark ate with gusto, as if he hadn't destroyed the person sitting right across from him. I stared at the man I once adored. I knew every detail of his face, but the man inside was a stranger, shallow and greedy. Once the ink dries tomorrow, I said, voice suddenly calm. I am leaving Chicago. I am moving to Oregon. He paused, stake midair. For a split second, I saw a flicker of something. Regret. It vanished. Replaced by cold indifference. Oregon, to that drafty cabin your grandmother left you. Good. Go rot in the woods. It suits you. He kept eating, returning to his texts. Suddenly, his phone buzzed, a loud, gaudy ringtone. His face lit up in a way it never did for me. Hey, babe, he cooed, voice dripping with fake sweetness. Yeah, just wrapping up business with the ex. No, it is boring. I will be there in 20 minutes. Wait for me. He hung up, wiped his mouth, and tossed the napkin onto his half-eaten steak. He stood up, leaving, I asked, stunned. We are not finished. I am, he said. Brenda needs me. She is stressing about the flowers. He turned, grabbing the bill, and tossed it onto my plate. It landed with a thud in the sauce. You get this. He smirked, chilling my blood. Consider it a wedding gift. Without you covering the bills, I could not afford her. Thanks for being the stepping stone, Sarah. He strode out, never looking back. I sat frozen, the restaurant noise fading to a dull roar. The humiliation burned. I looked at the stained bill, then the empty chair. I did not cry. Inside the woman he called tired, something snapped. It was not a break. It was a release. The shackles of being used were finally gone. Thank you, I whispered. Thanks for showing me exactly who you are. I waved the waiter over. Box this up, I said, pointing to his steak. My dog will love it. And bring the card machine. I have a life to start. The apartment was silent when I got home. This place was supposed to be our forever home. We bought it when his company finally turned a profit. I remember dancing in the empty living room the day we got the keys. I thought we made it. Standing in the dark now. I realized the hard part was loving a man who saw me as an appliance, useful only until a newer model appeared. I grabbed boxes and started packing. Just my things. The settlement was brutal but simple. He kept the place in the business. I got a small lump sum that barely covered my moving costs and the debts I piled up for groceries. He had a shark of a lawyer. I had a public defender mentality and a need to escape. I opened the closet. His suits took up most of the space. My clothes were shoved in a tiny corner. I pulled out my dresses. My hand brushed a shirt I bought him. It used to smell like cedar. Now it smelled of cheap, floral perfume. Brenda, the scent of betrayal. I threw the shirt on the floor, then another. A pile of cotton formed at my feet. I wanted to burn them. I wanted to scream, but I stayed practical. I had a train to catch in 48 hours. I moved to the dresser. opening the bottom drawer where I kept things that mattered. Hidden under sweaters was a battered cherry wood box. Nana Rose gave it to me before she passed. I sat on the floor, tracing the smooth wood. Nana was the only one who truly understood me. When I dropped out of art school to help Mark, she did not scold me. She just looked at me and said, "Sarah, give your heart, but never your soul. And never let a man define your worth." I had not listened. I gave my soul, my credit score, and my youth. I opened the box, old photos, graduation, Nana in her garden, and pictures of Mark. I looked radiant. He looked hungry. He was not looking at me with love. He was looking at me like a resource. I took our photos and ripped them down the middle. Rip, rip, rip. The sound was satisfying. I tossed the halves with his face into the trash. I kept my side. I needed to remember the girl I used to be. Tucked in the box was my old sketchbook. I flipped through the pages, intricate vase designs, sketches, charcoal coastlines. They were good, full of life. "You claimed I had no drive," I whispered. "You were wrong. I used all my drive pushing you up that hill." I packed my box, clothes and toiletries, left the furniture, left the espresso machine I scrimped for, left my handmade curtains. Those belonged to the CEO wife, not to Clara. By 3 a.m., the apartment felt like a stranger's house. Furniture remained, but the place felt hollow. My soul had already clocked out. I made tea in the dark, watching Seattle S lights. The city of dreams had chewed me up and spat me out, but I didn't feel defeated. I felt lighter. The exhaustion of playing trophy wife was gone. The rent check anxiety, the nagging feeling that I was never quite enough, all gone. I grabbed a sticky note and a pen. I scribbled a message and slapped it on the fridge, right over the wedding tasting he had circled in red. I took my clothes and my pride. "Keep the rest. You will need it to fill the void where your heart should be. Clara." I dropped my keys. A sharp clink. I dragged my suitcases out and cut the lights. Darkness swallowed the penthouse. "Goodbye, prison," I whispered. I stepped into the hall and left the door unlatched. I just did not care. The downtown courthouse was where hope went to die. Choked by red tape and buzzing lights, the air tasted of stale coffee and desperation. I sat on a hard bench, smoothing my simple dress, no makeup. I wanted to look exactly like what I was, a woman shedding a false skin. Julian arrived with his lawyer, a shark in an expensive suit. Julian looked wrecked. Dark circles hung under his eyes. Was that new girl wearing him out, or was it guilt? No, Julian did not do guilt. Probably just wedding stress. He sat opposite me, avoiding my gaze, tapping his foot, checking his phone every 30 seconds. "All rise," the bailiff droned. The hearing was a blur of legal terms, irreconcilable differences, and me waving support. That last part was the bitter pill. His lawyer had threatened to drain my remaining savings if I pushed for alimony. I chose freedom over his money. I needed out, seriously. "Clara Vance, you agree." The judge checked her glasses. I glanced at Julian. He was tracking the wall clock. "Yes, Your Honor," I said, voice rock steady. "I agree on you, Mr. Thorne. Yes, yes, I agree," Julian barked, desperate to speed things up. The judge glowered but stamped the decree. Marriage officially dissolved. The gavel dropped. 8 years of history vanished in 15 minutes. I left feeling hollow yet wired. I was free. But in the hall, Julian was sprinting for the elevator. Already on his phone. "It is done, babe. Yeah, coming to get you for the scan. Hang tight." He vanished into his car. That son of a voice hissed. Sarah, my best friend, stood there clutching 2 coffees, murder in her eyes. Sarah was my polar opposite, loud, fierce, and always ready to fight. "Sarah," I sighed, grabbing the cup. "It is over. Let him run. You do not get it, do you?" She pulled me into a quiet corner. "You did not hear him." "Ultrasound. Clara, wake up." I froze. The word hit me hard. Ultrasound. "He is not just marrying her for looks," Sarah muttered, voice unusually grave. "My cousin works the clinic desk uptown. She saw Julian and his assistant walk in last week. She is 3 months along." My world tilted. 3 months. That meant they were active while I was home doing his laundry and cooking his dinners. "Pregnant," I whispered. Nausea took over. "That is why he rushed the divorce," Sarah said, eyes blazing. "He needed you gone before she started showing. He is erasing your life to build his new empire." I leaned against the cold wall, eyes shut. I thought I had hit bottom. But there was a deeper basement. He did not just replace me. He started a family behind my back, a family I wanted, but he always said, "Not yet. Business comes first." It was never about timing, was it? I asked, laughing bitterly. It was about the woman. He did not want kids with me. "Because you were the workhorse," Sarah said, gripping my shoulders. "She is just the show pony." Look, show ponies are pricey. I know his firm is underwater. He is leveraging everything to keep up appearances. I stared at her. It does not matter. "Sarah, let him sink. I am heading to Oregon," Sarah softened, pulling me into a tight hug. "Go to Oregon, heal, plant that garden, but mark my words. Karma has a GPS, and it knows exactly where Julian lives. Focus on you." I pulled back. "He thinks he won. Sarah, he thinks he tossed out the trash. One man is trash as another is treasure." Sarah winked, trying to make me smile. Or, "One man is trash as a diamond he was too dumb to polish. Go catch your train. Leave this garbage in Seattle." I walked into the bright sunlight. The pregnancy news stung, sure, but it also cauterized the wound. No more fixing things. Just the cold, ugly truth. I hailed a cab. "Train station, please." Merging into traffic, I pulled out my phone, found Julian in my contacts, hit delete. Then I popped the back, pulled the SIM card and snapped it clean in two. I rolled the window down and tossed the plastic onto the asphalt. Goodbye, Seattle, I whispered. Good luck, honey, you will need it. The train hummed a steady, rhythmic lullaby that drowned out the noise in my head. Clack, clack, whoosh! I stared out the window for hours, watching gray concrete fade into rolling fields and the distant jagged peaks of the west. I booked a sleeper car, an expense I could barely afford. But I needed the walls. I could not sit in coach, shoulder to shoulder with strangers, hiding that I was a woman fleeing her own wreckage. Day 2. The view was vast and empty. It matched my mood. Empty but spacious. Room to breathe. I pulled out a book, but I could not focus. My mind drifted to Julie and his face when he tossed the bill at me. That cold contempt. How does love turn into that? How does I do turn into get out? I headed for the dining car. It was half full. I found a small table by the window. Across the aisle sat an older woman, maybe 70, with a chic silver bob and sharp eyes. She was knitting a chaotic explosion of colors. She caught me staring and smiled. It is a scarf, she said, her voice raspy and warm. Or a blanket. It has not decided yet. I am just letting it happen. I smiled back, a real one for the first time in days. That is a solid philosophy. I am Martha, she said. You look like you are running away or running towards something. Which is it? I hesitated. I rarely talk to strangers, but I had no SIM. No husband, no home. What did I have to lose? Running away, I admitted, warming my hands on the coffee. My ex traded me in for a younger model and a baby. Martha stopped knitting. She peered at me over her glasses. Ah, the midlife crisis upgrade. Classic. Painful, but classic, she said. I was exhausted, I admitted, the words spilling out. I smelled like struggle. I worked 2 jobs to build his company, and now he is living the life I paid for. Martha nodded. Needles clicking. Honey, listen, men like that are parasites. They attach, drain the host, then move on. But once the parasite leaves, the host recovers. The parasite, it starves without a fresh victim. He found one, I said bitterly. She is 24. She is not a victim yet. Martha corrected. She is just the next meal. Give it time, she leaned in. Where are you heading, Oregon? Willow Creek. My grandmother left me an old stone house. I have not been back in years. Oregon? Martha sighed. Big trees, clean air, rich soil. A place to grow roots, not just park a car. Make that house yours. Strip the wallpaper, paint it colors he would hate. Reclaim your life. I am scared, I confessed. I am 32, no job, no husband, no savings. I feel like a failure. Martha let out a sharp, barking laugh. Failed, you survived. You did not fail, you escaped. You think staying with a man who disrespects you is winning. That is losing, dear. Walking away with your head high, that is the real victory. She slid a chocolate across the table. Eat, remember, sometimes the train has to cross a long, dark tunnel to reach the coast. You are in the tunnel now, but the ocean is waiting. I ate the bitter chocolate. The train whistled, a lonely sound in the dark. I went back to my cabin. Martha is words echoing. I did not fail. I escaped. I lay in my bunk, watching the moon race the train. For the first time, I saw the future as a blank canvas, not a void. By morning, the landscape shifted. The plains rose into jagged, pine-covered mountains. The air through the vents felt cooler and sharper. We were crossing into Oregon. My heart raced with anticipation. The conductor's voice crackled. Next stop, Willow Creek. I gathered my bags, checking my reflection in the mirror. I looked tired, pale, but my eyes were clear. The dull resignation was gone. The train hissed to a halt. I stepped onto the platform. The air hit me, damp earth, pine and rain, pure, clean. It did not smell like betrayal. I dragged my suitcases toward the edge, looking at the town nestled in the valley. It looked like a painting. I whispered to the wind. I am home. Nana, finally home. The taxi driver. Pete, a chatty guy in a flannel shirt, dropped me at the end of the gravel driveway. Nobody has lived at the old Rose place for years, he noted. Just the ivy climbing the stone. A shame. It used to be the prettiest garden in the county. It will be again, I said, handing him the cash. It was a promise. I stood before the house. It was a sturdy 2-story riverstone cottage with a slate roof and a wide porch. A fairy tale paused for 5 years. Weeds choked the roses. The blue shutter paint was peeling, and one hung crookedly, banging in the breeze. But it was mine, truly mine. I found the spare key exactly where Nana kept it, under the 3rd terracotta pot left of the door. The lock was stiff, but with a jiggle, the oak door creaked open. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight. The air smelled musty. Mixed with the faint scent of Nana is lavender potpourri. Furniture sat under white sheets, like ghosts waiting for a party. I pulled the sheet off Nana's favorite wingback chair by the fireplace, dust puffed up, making me cough. Okay, I said aloud. First, windows. I spent 3 hours opening every window, letting the fresh Oregon breeze clear out the stagnation. I swept, wiped counters, and prepped the guest bed. I could not sleep in Nana's room yet. By evening, my muscles ached a good, accomplished ache. I sat at the kitchen table with instant tea. I remembered baking cookies here. I remembered crying over a boy at this table and Nana saying, "Boys are like buses, Wendy." Another comes every 15 minutes. Your education, though, is yours forever. I had disappointed her by dropping out. Guilt pricked at me. I noticed a stack of mail left by the property managers, mostly junk flyers and bills I had set to autopay. But at the bottom sat a thick, cream-colored envelope. No postmark. My name, Wendy Miller, written in elegant, cursive ink. I knew that handwriting instantly. It was not Nana's. It was Mr. Higgins, her longtime lawyer and friend. I tore it open. The letter was dated 5 years ago, the week Nana died. Dear Wendy, if you are reading this, 2 things happened. First, I have passed. Second, you finally returned to Willow Creek alone. My hands trembled. How did she know? I know you loved Curtis, but I have seen 80 years of life. I know a wolf when I see one. He wants your wealth, not you. I could have left everything, but he would have squandered it. So, I set a trap. Call Higgins. You cannot touch a dime until you are 40 or until your marriage ends. I prayed for your happiness, but if you are reading this, he failed you. You will need this to start over. Be brave. You are stronger than you realize. You are finally free. Love, Nana Rose. Tears blurred my vision as I read. She saw through his act. She locked my inheritance away to keep it safe. It was past 5, the office was closed, and I barely slept. My mind raced. Did she leave enough to patch the roof or to build a new life? Regardless, it was safe. He never knew it existed. For the first time in 8 years, I had a secret, and it felt incredible. The law office sat exactly where it always had, wedged between the bakery and the hardware store. It still had that old charm brick walls and a jingling bell. Mr. Higgins sat behind a desk that looked like a small fortress. He looked like a kind owl. He smiled and shook my hand. His grip was strong. I have been waiting. You are back in town. Word travels fast, I said. He chuckled. Word travels faster than light. He turned serious. You found the letter. I nodded and slid my divorce papers across the desk. Nana said I needed these. He studied the document carefully, finalized. I am sorry for the pain, Wendy, but your timing is perfect. He pulled out a leather binder. Your grandmother was a remarkable investor. Very few knew she was a genius with stocks. I was stunned. Nana invested since the 70s. He nodded. She bought land cheap and tech stocks when everyone thought computers were a fad. She lived simply by choice, not necessity. He turned the binder toward me. This is the Rose Miller Trust. Your assets, the house, the stocks. The cash total $5,240,000. I stopped breathing. The room spun. $5 million. This has to be a mistake. Nana sold jams at the fair. She put every dollar into Berkshire Hathaway. Higgins smiled. It is all yours. You are divorced. The wolf is gone. I sank back, shocked, for years. I clipped coupons and walked to save bus fare. I took his abuse over the cost of coffee. I lived like a beggar in my own home. All that time, I was a millionaire. Does he know? I whispered. Not a chance, Higgins said. The trust was hidden. Since you received this after the divorce, it is not marital property. He cannot touch a cent. It is all yours, Sarah, clean and clear. I started to giggle, then roared with laughter. Tears streamed down my face. I felt liberated. He handed me tissues. I am just fine, I promised. I am just thinking. He left because he thought I was poor. He figured I could not fund his lifestyle. He tossed money at me like I was a servant. Higgins leaned back. You could buy that restaurant now. No, I said. A new clarity hit me. I do not want the restaurant, and I want no attention. Discretion is smart, he agreed. Money brings vultures in a town this small. I want my home back. I want to renovate it myself. I need to heal. Money buys comfort, but not peace. I have to earn it. A mature choice. He nodded. We will set up a monthly allowance. You live well, but keep the principal growing. I stood up and shook his hand again. I walked in as a failure. I walked out as an heiress and a survivor. The sun felt warm. Same jeans, messy bun, but I knew the truth. I held the ultimate weapon against him. I was everything he wanted to be. Yet he threw it away. I walked to the hardware store for tools and paint. I bought expensive leather gloves just because I could. The following months were peaceful. I lived on my allowance and poured myself into the house. I scraped off ugly wallpaper and sanded the floors until the wood glowed. I pruned the rose bushes, cutting away dead wood, a lesson not lost on me. I joined a local pottery studio. The owner, Claire, hired me to teach. You have the touch, she said, watching me center the clay. You move with the clay instead of fighting it. I learned the hard way. I smiled. Fighting only gets you nowhere. Teaching gave me purpose. I met mothers and retirees. We laughed and made a mess. I was just Sarah the pottery teacher, not a CEO wife. One Tuesday, a booming voice echoed. Is this teacher any good? I turned to see a large man in a cowboy hat. Uncle Roy, I gasped. He was my father-in-law's former partner, but always the honest one. He moved to Oregon years ago, little Sarah. He gave me a huge tobacco-scented hug. Why are you here? I live here now. I beamed. I took over Nana Place. And Marcus. My smile faded. We are divorced. Roy's face darkened. That weasel. He traded you for his secretary. She is 24 and pregnant. He is a complete idiot. Just like his father, chasing glitter and missing the gold. Roy became a regular friend. He helped with the heavy work, the gutters, and the porch. We sat drinking iced tea, and he told stories about the fake business crowd. I never told him about the money. I wanted him to like me. Not my bank account. You seem happy, kid, he said one evening. I am. I realized I have peace. Peace is expensive. Roy nodded. Most rich folks I know are miserable, Marcus. For instance, I hear he is sweating. Oh, I tried to sound casual. Yeah. He is leveraged to the hilt for this wedding. Trying to impress people who do not care. I sip tea, hiding a smile. I hope he knows how to swim. I was rebuilding my life brick by brick. My foundation was solid stone, but as Nana warned, the wolf has hungry eyes. My peace was broken by my phone. It was Deborah. Grab popcorn, she said. I have scalding tea. I wiped the clay from my hands. What is happening? The wedding is a circus. Sarah, Marcus is obsessed with his image. He is trying to land a contract with the Tanaka Group. Big investors. This contract is the only thing keeping his company afloat. He has been bleeding cash since you left. You managed his budget so he could reinvest now. He hires consultants for everything. Tiffany is spending his money on nursery decor. He is broke. But he is spending like a king to impress Tanaka at the wedding. He wants to look stable. The wedding was set to be the event of the year. Deborah caught her breath. They booked the grand ballroom and hired a full orchestra. And Tiffany or Sarah, whatever, ordered a custom dress from Paris. $25,000, I gasped. 25 grand. Does he even have that? That is the best part, Deborah squealed. My cousin at the bank, the one who loathes Marcus, said his cards are maxed. He is taking out predatory loans, gambling everything on this Tanaka deal. He is unhinged, I whispered. He is going to crash. He is desperate, Deborah corrected. And Tiffany is steering the ship into an iceberg. She threw a tantrum because her tiara diamonds were too small. She acts like a billionaire's wife, and Marcus is too terrified to admit he is broke. I looked around my quiet studio. My vase, simple and flawed, felt real. The contrast hit hard. Marcus was drowning in debt, hiding behind a tuxedo. I was wearing a mud-stained apron, sitting on a fortune, and I never felt richer. There is more. Deborah said, I got an invite. What? Why? Because my husband Dave is still a client. Marcus needs a crowded room to look successful. He thinks I am gullible enough to show up with a gift. You going? Are you crazy? I would not miss this wreck. I will drink his expensive champagne and live stream the disaster to you. You need to see this, Sarah. You need to see what you escaped. I don't know, Deb. Yes, you do. You need closure. See him sweating in that tight suit while his fake world crumbles. It is therapy. Oh, and guess who else is invited? Who, your Uncle Roy? Roy! I sat up. He is here in Oregon. We hang out. Marcus invited him, probably because Roy knows the Tanaka people. He is using everyone, Sarah. He is using Roy for networking. I just smiled. Uncle Roy, the guy who pegged Curtis as a total snake. He knew I was happy, but had no idea I was loaded. Best of all, Roy could never keep a secret after 2 whiskeys. If he goes, I said, things get interesting. Just tell him to go. Deborah urged, tell him to show up for the team that night. I invited Roy over for a roast chicken dinner. Heard you got an invite to that fancy New York wedding, I said. Roy groaned. That snake Curtis. I threw the invite out. You should go, I said, topping off his glass. Why, I hate the guy. Because, I said, leaning in, he is trying to scam a Japanese investor. You could see the whole show. It would be hilarious. Roy looked at me, eyes twinkling. He laughed, a deep rumble. You are up to something, kid? But you are right. I have not seen a train wreck in ages. And I owe his dad a favor. Maybe saving the family name is it. Just promise one thing, I said. Don't tell him I am living at Nana's. Just tell him I am doing great. Roy winked. I will tell him you are royalty if you want. I will book the flight tomorrow. I went to bed with a strange buzz in the air. The stage was set. The players were in position. Curtis was building a house of cards, and Roy was headed there like a hurricane. I did not know what would happen. I certainly did not know if my secret was safe. But one thing was certain. Curtis Stone was about to have the worst wedding day ever, and I had a front row seat. Part 9. The secret under the dress the week before the wedding. The air in my pottery studio felt heavy, charged like a storm. I was glazing mugs when Deborah called. She skipped the pleasantries. Sit down, Wendy. Put the clay away. You need to hear this. I wiped my hands and grabbed a stool. Deborah, you are scaring me. Did Curtis hurt someone? No. Deborah dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. But he is being played. Played like a total fool. Remember the pregnancy, the 3-month miracle that forced the quick divorce. The reason I am in Oregon, I said dryly, it is fake. The studio went deathly silent. I blinked. What do you mean fake? You said your cousin saw them at the clinic. My cousin saw them in the waiting room, Deborah corrected, voice trembling. But get this. A friend of mine who works in high-end retail was helping Tiffany with a final dress fitting. Deborah paused, and I pressed. When Tiffany stripped down, there was no bump. Wendy, flat as a board. Sarah said she saw Tiffany pull a silicone prosthetic from her bag. A fake belly. She strapped it on before the dress went back on. I felt a wave of cold horror. A fake pregnancy. It was the oldest, trashiest trick in the book. The kind of drama you only see on TV. She is trapping him, I whispered. She knows he needs an heir to land the Tanaka deal. She is using a piece of silicone to lock down a ring. Exactly, Deborah said, and Sarah heard her talking on the phone in the dressing room. She was bragging to someone, she said. Once the ring is on and the papers are signed, I will just have a tragic miscarriage. He will be too sad to leave me. My blood ran cold. It was diabolical, using a fake child as an anchor. It was cruel, even hating Curtis. The idea of him grieving a fake kid made me sick. He does not know, I asked. Not a clue. He is too deep in debt to notice his fiancée's belly is rubber. He is likely so stressed he has not touched her in weeks. I walked to the window, looking at the quiet streets of Willow Creek. It felt like another world. In New York, Curtis was walking into a trap set by an even bigger predator. What are you going to do? Deborah asked. Are you going to tell him? I thought about it. I remembered him throwing the bill at me. I thought about him calling me old. The 8 years of my life he wasted. No, I said, my voice hardening. He wanted a shark. Deborah, he got a shark. Let us see if he can swim. That is my girl. Deborah cheered. I will keep the stream ready. Saturday is going to be a bloodbath. I hung up. I looked at the unfinished mugs. I picked up a tool and slashed a deep line into the clay. I was not usually vindictive, but Nana Rose taught me to respect consequences. Curtis built his life on a foundation of lies. It was only fitting his choice was the biggest lie of all. That night, I could not sleep. I kept imagining the wedding vows for richer or poorer. Both were lying about being rich. Both were secretly broke. A marriage of two bankruptcies pretending to be a merger. I went to the garden in my pajamas. The moon was full. I touched a thorny stem. You reap what you sow, Curtis, I whispered to the night. Saturday arrived with gray rain in Oregon, but on my laptop, it was a glittering New York evening. Deborah had her phone perfectly aimed at a centerpiece, giving me a wide view of the Plaza Hotel. I sat in my living room wrapped in a blanket, tea in one hand, popcorn in the other. It felt surreal. I was watching the funeral of my past life. The venue was obscenely lavish. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceiling. Thousands of white roses created a suffocating floral jungle. Ice swans were everywhere. A 10-piece orchestra played Vivaldi. It smells like money and desperation in here. Deborah texted, the shrimp are cold, but the champagne is flowing. I scanned the guests. I saw old friends who used to come over for potlucks when we were broke. They looked uncomfortable in rented tuxedos. I saw the Tanaka group, 5 serious men in sharp suits, sitting near the front, watching with polite detachment. Then the music swelled. The doors opened. Curtis walked in first. My breath hitched. He looked terrible. Even in a bespoke tuxedo, the camera zoom revealed the truth. He was sweating. His smile was just a tight grimace. His eyes darted around, not with joy, but with pure panic. He looked like a man waiting for a bomb. He took his place. Then came Tiffany. She was a vision of excess. A cloud of tulle and lace with crystals that caught the light aggressively. She wore a tiara heavy enough to cause a neck injury. And there, under the bodice, was the bump of perfect curve she cradled protectively as she walked. Look at her, I muttered. Performance of a lifetime. She reached the altar. Curtis took her hand. I saw him flinch, like her touch burned. The ceremony was a blur of hollow vows. I, Curtis, take you, Tiffany? To be my wealthy, wed wife. I imagined him saying it. I imagined her thinking. I, Tiffany, take you, Curtis, to pay my parents' mortgage. They kissed. It was a show for the cameras. The guests clapped politely. The Tanaka men clapped exactly 3 times each. Then came the reception. This was the real show. The head table was elevated like a throne. Curtis and Tiffany sat there, looking down on the peasants. I saw Curtis leaning in, whispering something angry. Tiffany whispered back, wearing a fake, frozen smile for the cameras. Trouble in paradise. I wondered. Deborah texted. I just walked by. Curtis told her to stop ordering vintage wine because the tab is maxed out. She told him to shut up and smile for the investors. I shook my head. They were trapped in their own cage. Then the camera panned to the table next to the Tanaka group. My heart skipped a beat. There was Uncle Roy. He wore a tuxedo 20 years old and a size too small. His bow tie was crooked. In front of him were 3 empty whiskey glasses. Oh no! I whispered. Roy, please be sober. But he was howling at some joke from the man next to him. That was Mr. Miller, the bank VP holding Arthur's loans. A total train wreck. Roy, the loose cannon, and Miller, the debt collector, sitting 10 feet from the fraud. I leaned in. Speeches were starting. That pompous clown Arthur was testing the mic. Ladies and gentlemen, a toast. Roy stayed seated, whispering aggressively at Miller. I could not hear them, but Roy was making quite a scene. He pointed at the camera recording this. Maybe he was pointing at me. My stomach flipped. I told Roy to keep my secrets, especially about the house and the cash. But Roy was 3 bourbons deep and absolutely loathed Arthur. Just eat the cake and be quiet, Roy. But trouble had arrived. Silverware clinked as the speeches dragged on. Arthur looked ready to snap. He kept checking his watch, eyeing the overseas investors. He needed this night to be perfect. He needed to look like a titan. Sarah's phone was close enough that I could finally hear. The room had gone quiet for the toasts. Suddenly, Roy's stage whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. This guy talks more than a politician. People shushed him. Miller looked deeply uncomfortable. He tried to ignore him, but Roy was on a roll, Roy said, leaning on Miller. I just got back from Montana, real country. Not like this plastic city. Miller gave a polite, stiff nod. That is nice, sir. Roy boomed during a gap in the speeches. Little Wendy, you know Wendy, the groom's ex-wife. Arthur stiffened, his head snapping toward Roy. Tiffany rolled her eyes, annoyed her big moment was being ruined by an ex. I met her once, Miller stammered. Great girl, Roy shouted. Salt of the earth. Smarter than this idiot, he said, gesturing to Arthur. The room went dead silent. The best man stopped mid-sentence. All eyes turned to the red-faced man in the tux. Roy, please, Arthur said, forcing a laugh. Let us not bore everyone with history. We are here to celebrate the future, Arthur insisted. Future, Roy scoffed, swaying slightly. What future? The one you built on credit. A collective gasp rippled through the room. The investors looked wary. Sit down, Roy, Arthur hissed, his face turning beet red. I am just telling my friend about Wendy, Roy said. The girl you tossed aside like trash. Turns out trash is actually gold. Arthur, my heart hammered. Roy, please. Stop, I saw her, Roy announced to the room. She is in Silver Creek now, with a garden full of roses, and she looks happy. Really happy. Not like you, sweating through that cheap suit. I am calling security. Tiffany shrieked. Get this drunk out of here. Wait, Roy yelled. I just want the banker to hear the best part. You know Nana Rose. Everyone thought she was just a gardener. Roy slapped the table. The sound cracked like a gunshot. Turns out Roy beamed. Nana Rose was a genius. She left Wendy a massive trust fund. Arthur froze. His anger vanished, replaced by pure confusion. What trust fund? Wendy was broke. That is what you thought. Roy laughed. Everyone thought that. I saw the papers, Roy continued. I saw the house. Wendy is sitting on a fortune. I covered my face. He was ruining everything. How much? Someone whispered. Everyone wanted the number. Roy grinned and held up 5 fingers. 500,000. Arthur sneered. That is cute. No, you idiot. $5 million. The silence was absolute. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. 5 million, Roy repeated, savoring every word. Cash and assets, all hers. And here is the kicker. She got it the day you divorced her. If you stayed married, you might have seen a penny, but you dumped her, so she took it all. I watched the color drain from Arthur's face. He looked like a wax statue. His mouth hung open. 5 million. It was enough to save his firm 10 times over. He had walked away from a fortune to marry a broke secretary with a fake pregnancy. You are lying, Arthur whispered, voice cracking. Wendy is broke. She worked at a diner to feed you, Roy yelled. Now she is the richest woman in town. And you are marrying that. He pointed at Tiffany. She jumped up, furious. Don't you dare talk about me. I am worth 10 of her. But Arthur was staring into space, doing the math, the agonizing math of his own stupidity. 5 million, he mouthed. He looked like a man who just burned a winning lottery ticket. But the disaster was not over. Mr. Miller, the banker, was looking at Arthur with a cold expression. He stood up slowly and adjusted his glasses. Mr. Stone, Miller said, cutting through the murmurs. Is this true? Did you divorce a multimillionaire? It does not matter, Arthur snapped, trying to regain control. That is her money. I have my company. I have this deal. He looked desperately at the overseas investors. About that, Miller said, pulling a file from his jacket. Since we are sharing truths tonight. Oh no. Here it comes. I remembered Miller from our old mortgage application. He was a by-the-book man who hated humor, which made what he did next even more brutal. Mr. Stone, Miller said, his voice echoing. You asked for an emergency loan extension just yesterday. You claimed you had significant personal assets coming into this marriage. Arthur looked like a trapped animal. This is not the place. Miller, we are at a wedding. A wedding you paid for with a check that bounced this morning, Miller said coldly. Gasps erupted. The investors were already whispering. One began packing his briefcase. It was a clerical error, Arthur stammered, sweat pouring down his face. I will transfer the funds on Monday. There are no funds, Arthur, Miller said, dropping all pleasantries. We audited you. You are overdrawn by $400,000. Your company is insolvent. Tiffany let out a strangled cry and grabbed his arm. What is he talking about? You said you were rich. You said the company was booming. Arthur shook her off. Shut up, Tiffany. Not now. Miller turned to Tiffany with utter distaste. Speaking of assets, Miss Miller or Mrs. Stone? I suppose visited my branch last week. Tiffany froze, her hand flying to her diamond necklace. She made quite a scene, Miller told the room. She demanded to know why her fiancé's card was declined at the flower shop. She shouted that she could not believe she had to lend this loser $5,000 of her own money for centerpieces. I thought I was marrying a CEO, not a charity case. The room exploded. Laughter. Shock whispers. It was pure chaos. You told the bank that. Arthur turned to Tiffany, eyes bulging. You called me a loser. Well, you are one. Tiffany shrieked, her act finally cracking. You are broke. You made me pay for the flowers. You made me pay for the DJ. I thought it was a temporary problem. You said you had millions. I would have had millions if I never met you, Arthur roared, gesturing wildly. So you lied to me, Tiffany screamed, stomping her foot. You tricked me. I wasted my youth on you, your youth. Arthur laughed. A manic, high-pitched sound. You are 24. You have known me 6 months. The head of the overseas delegation stood up, looking at Arthur with pure ice. We do not do business with clowns. The deal is off. The delegation marched out in unison. No, wait. Arthur ran after them, tripping over Tiffany's massive train. He scrambled on his knees. Mr. Tanaka, please. It is a misunderstanding. I have the capital, you have nothing, Miller said, closing his file. The bank is foreclosing on your apartment Monday. Enjoy the cake, Mr. Stone. It is the last thing you will ever own. Arthur knelt on the floor, watching his dream turn to ash, his company. His reputation, his future, all gone. He turned to the head table. Uncle Roy was cackling. Best wedding ever. Hey, waiter, more whiskey. I was not laughing. I watched Arthur's face. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a hollow, terrifying realization. He looked directly at the camera, right at Sarah's phone, as if he could feel my gaze. He knew, in that moment he knew I was watching. He stood up shaking, looking at Tiffany, who was crying tears of pure, unadulterated rage. She was glued to her phone, probably checking if she could return the gown. You, Arthur pointed a shaking finger at her. You did this. Your greed forced me to spend cash I didn't have. Me, Sheila hissed. You wanted to play the big shot. Now look at you, broke and pathetic. I gave up everything for you, Arthur screamed. I traded a millionaire wife for you. A wife you never even knew was wealthy. Sheila mocked. God. You are dim. That was it. The vein in Arthur's temple pulsed. The mood in the ballroom shifted from humiliation to pure danger. The room felt electric. Arthur's hands balled into tight fists. His face was a mask of cold hatred. You called me dim, Arthur whispered. Stepping closer. Yes, dim and penniless, Sheila yelled, backing away but still defiant. You know what? I am done. I'm not sinking with this ship. I'm leaving. You are going nowhere, Arthur growled. You are my wife. You signed the papers. I will annul this, Sheila shouted. It is fraud. You scammed me. Arthur lunged. He didn't hit her, but he grabbed a massive centerpiece, a tower of roses and glass, and hurled it down. It shattered everywhere. Drinks drenched the table. Guests screamed. Security rushed the stage. You want fraud, Arthur roared. Talk about your spending. 20,000 for a gown, 10 for flowers. You drained me, you leech. I had to look the part. Sheila snapped back. Unlike your dowdy ex-wife. Don't you dare bring her up, Arthur yelled. She was worth 10 of you. She was real. You are just plastic. Face. Plastic life. Plastic heart. Sheila smirked, grabbing a champagne bottle like a weapon. You left her for this, remember, because she was old. Well, guess what, honey? Now you are old and broke. The insult hit Arthur like a punch. He reeled, scanning hundreds of phones recording his downfall, until his gaze locked on Sheila's stomach. The baby. The only reason he pushed through this mess. At least I have my son, Arthur muttered. We have the baby. We have to make this work. Sheila let out a sharp, cruel laugh. The baby. Oh, Arthur, you are pathetic. She rested a hand on her belly. You think I would let a loser like you breed with me? Arthur froze. What? The room fell silent again. Even Uncle Roy stopped drinking. What did you say? Arthur whispered. I said. Sheila sneered. There is no baby. This moment when his last hope vanished was the peak of the drama. I sat in my home in Oregon, tea cold, heart racing. I watched the realization hit him. It was ugly, but it was necessary. He had to be broken to see the truth. If you are watching and feeling that rush of karma, smash that like button and comment the number 1 below. Show me you are with me, watching justice served. Your support proves I am not alone in believing truth wins. Comment 1 now and watch this disaster finale. No baby. Arthur's voice was barely a whisper. Nope. Sheila popped the pea. I needed a ring. You needed an heir, I improvised. You lied. We both lied, darling. It is what we do. Arthur stared at her midsection, then her face. The betrayal was total. He had lost his wife, his fortune, and his pride for a lie. He let out a raw roar of agony. You ruined me, he lunged at her. Security moved too slow. Arthur was fueled by the madness of a man who lost everything. He grabbed the 7-tier wedding cake standing between them. With desperate strength, he shoved the whole tower. Get away from me, Sheila screamed, dodging. The cake toppled. Layers of sponge and frosting crashed onto her. She slipped on the icing, tumbling into a heap of white tulle, but as she fell, something happened. Something that made the entire ballroom gasp in horror. She grabbed the tablecloth to break her fall. Her body twisted. And the bump the round. Pregnant belly under her dress shifted. It didn't just move, it slid. It migrated from her stomach to her hip. Lying in the cake wreckage, Sheila looked up and everyone saw it. Her stomach was lopsided. The silicone pad had come loose. Oh my God, someone shouted. It is fake. It is actually fake. Arthur stood over her, breathing hard, his tuxedo splattered with frosting. He stared at the displaced bump. He reached down. Sheila tried to slap his hand away, screaming, but he grabbed the fabric and yanked. The silicone pad popped out, hitting the floor with a wet thud. It lay on the carpet, a pink, rubbery mound. Arthur stared at it, looking like he might vomit. A pillow, he whispered. I left my wife for a pillow. It is high-grade silicone, Sheila sobbed, trying to cover herself. It cost $500. $500, Arthur repeated hysterically. And it cost me $5 million. He started to laugh. It was the laugh of a man who had snapped. He kicked the silicone belly. It skittered across the floor, landing at the feet of his mother, who promptly fainted. Get out! Arthur screamed at the guests. Everyone, get out! The show is over. He grabbed a wine bottle and smashed it against the wall. Red wine sprayed like blood over the roses. Arthur, stop. His father tried to intervene, but Arthur shoved him back. You. Arthur pointed at Sheila, who was struggling to stand in the slippery frosting. You are the devil and a bankrupt loser, Sheila yelled back, wiping cream from her eyes. I am suing you for assault. I am suing for everything. Sue me. Arthur spread his arms. Take it. Take the debt. Take the foreclosure. Take the shame. It is all yours, honey. Half of nothing is nothing. Security finally reached him. 2 burly men grabbed Arthur by the arms. He didn't fight back. He just went limp, like a broken doll. Wendy, he suddenly screamed at the ceiling. Wendy, I know you are watching. I am sorry. I am so sorry. I stared at my screen. His apology didn't move me. It wasn't regret. It was a plea for a lifeline. Take him out, the manager ordered, as they dragged the groom out, kicking and screaming through the cake and glass. I felt a strange sense of finality. The monster wasn't scary anymore. He was just a pathetic man being tossed into the trash. Uncle Roy, bless him, was the last one on camera. He walked over to the silicone belly and poked it with his cane. Well, Roy boomed, that is a hell of a party favor. Deborah ended the stream. I sat in the silence of my Oregon home, the fire crackling softly. It was over. The destruction was absolute. Deborah called 20 minutes later, breathless. I am in the parking lot. You won't believe this. But it is not over. What is left? I asked, exhausted. He ruined the cake. She lost her belly. What else is there? The blackmail, Deborah said. I am hiding behind a van. Listen. She switched to audio only, the quality crisp in the night air. I heard heels clacking angrily on concrete. Then Arthur's voice. Hoarse and broken. Just leave. Sheila, go back to your parents. My parents. Sheila's voice was venomous. My parents sold their home to pay for your deposit. You idiot. They have nowhere to go. We are all ruined because of you. Because of me. Arthur sounded incredulous. You lied about the baby and the money. That makes us even. I want the ring back, Arthur demanded. Give me the ring, I can sell it. Maybe pay the catering staff so they don't sue me. The ring, Sheila laughed. You want this ring. Give it to me, Sheila. I pawned the real diamond 3 weeks ago. Sheila spat. This is cubic zirconia. I needed cash to cover the credit card minimums you were ignoring. So good luck selling a piece of glass. Arthur, I gasped. She had pawned the engagement ring. The level of deceit was staggering. They were two parasites feeding off each other, starving to death in the process. You, Arthur whispered, defeated. You are truly evil. I am a survivor, Sheila corrected. Now, here is the deal. You are signing over your car to me right now. It is the only thing left worth a dime. My car. How am I supposed to get home? Walk, Sheila said. Or ask your rich ex-wife for a ride. Oh, wait, she is in Oregon enjoying her millions. Sign the title. Arthur, or I go to the police and tell them you hit me. With witnesses, you will go to jail tonight. You wouldn't try me. I have nothing left to lose. I want the Mercedes. There was a long silence. Then the sound of keys jingling. Take it, Arthur whispered. Take it and go to hell. Pleasure doing business, hubby. I heard a door slam and tires squeal as Sheila peeled out of the lot, then silence. Just the sound of a man sobbing. Ugly, racking sobs. Brenda. I heard him whisper to the dark parking lot. What have I done? What have I done? Sarah jumped back on, her voice steady. He is on the curb, Brenda. He is ripping his suit to pieces. It is pathetic. Is Marcus there? I asked. Yeah, Marcus just walked out. He is standing over David. Listen, I heard Marcus say, Marcus. David sobbed, please. I need a loan, a bridge loan. I can fix this, fix this. Marcus sounded ice cold. Son, you cannot fix a pile of ash. You burned it, please. For my sake. For your father, Marcus said. I am going to give you advice. Do not call Brenda. Stay away from Washington if you get near her. I will personally ensure the auditors look into those creative taxes you filed in 2018. You know about that. David gasped. I know everything, Marcus said. Start walking. It is a long way to rock bottom, but you just arrived. I heard Marcus walking away. Sarah, I said quietly. Go home, it is finished. Are you okay? I am better than okay, I said. I am free. The fallout was brutal. On social media. David's crash was no secret. By Monday, hashtag fake bump ride and hashtag wedding smash were trending. The video of the silicone pad sliding across the floor hit 5 million views. David's firm did not just fail, it imploded. The foreign investors issued a statement distancing themselves from his conduct. With zero capital and massive debt, the bank moved in like a pack of wolves. They seized the office, the accounts, and yes, the condo. I heard from Mr. Miller that the foreclosure sale on our old home happened months later. It sold for dirt cheap to cover liens. The place where I once cried, where I packed my life away, was just a line item on a bank ledger. David tried to hide, but you cannot hide when you owe the wrong people. Sarah told me the loan sharks he borrowed from were not nearly as polite as the bank. David got jumped outside a motel in Queens. He ended up with a broken arm and missing teeth. The executive image was gone. The city king was sleeping on his brother's couch in Jersey, terrified to step outside. One email, generic address. Subject, Brenda, please. David wrote he messed up. Said Chloe tricked him, pushed him to the edge. He claimed he was broke, needed $50,000, mentioned our 8 years. Wanted me to remember the good times. I sat on my porch, watching a hummingbird. Remember the good times. I remembered him throwing bills at me. I remembered being called lazy. I remembered the smell of Chloe's perfume on his shirt. I hit reply. David, I remember everything. That is why the answer is no. Don't contact me again. Blocked. Then I called my lawyer and donated 50 grand to a charity for abuse survivors, in David S.'s name. I told the lawyer he finally did something good. As for Chloe, the girl who wanted to be royalty, her fall was silent, but brutal. The internet is a cruel place for grifters. She was exposed, harassed. She deleted her life online. For her, that was like losing an arm. Her parents, who blew their savings on that failed wedding, were downsized to a tiny rental. They blamed her. The neighbors blamed her. She couldn't find office work anywhere. Her face was infamous as the fake bride. Sarah sent me a photo, taken at a rural diner. It was Chloe. Stained uniform, hairnet, pouring coffee for truckers. She looked aged. The spark was gone. Her nails were bitten down. She looked exhausted. She looked exactly how David used to describe me. Karma, Sarah texted. She wanted a rich husband to save her. Now she is pouring coffee for minimum wage. I looked at the picture. I didn't feel joy. I felt balance. She tried to cheat the system. To steal a life she never earned. The universe corrected it. I deleted the photo. She was just a bit player in a bad chapter. And I had already turned the page. 6 months later, spring hit Oak Ridge. My garden was exploding with color. Roses my grandmother planted bloomed in crimson and ivory. I added sage and hydrangeas. The house, once sad, was now a warm, sunny yellow with crisp white shutters. I stood in the garden, tea in hand, feeling the sun. I wasn't just a gardener. My pottery class became a real business. I bought the studio from a friend when she retired anonymously using a sliver of the trust. I named it the Golden Kiln. Profits went into scholarships for local girls in design. I was wealthy, sure, but no one knew how much. To them, I was just Brenda, the lady who made bowls and paid for the coffee of the person in line behind her. Uncle Marcus visited for lunch. He looked healthier. Home cooking softened his edges. You look different, kid, Marcus said. bread in hand. Different. How? Lighter, he said. You used to carry a pack full of bricks. Now you look like you're floating. I put the bricks down. Marcus, I smiled. Any news from the idiot? Marcus asked. He refused to say David's name. Last I heard. He is selling cars in Jersey. Commission only, Marcus snorted. Fitting. He always was a salesman. Too bad he sold his soul for a discount. I looked at the hills. I thought about the woman on that train scared, broken, defining herself by the man who left her. I realized now that David leaving wasn't a tragedy. It was an eviction notice from a prison I didn't know I was in, if he hadn't left. I'd still be in that apartment ironing shirts. Worrying about money, shrinking to fit his small world. I never would have found my art. I never would have found myself. You know, I told Marcus, I think I should send him a thank you card. Don't you dare, Brenda. I won't. I laughed. But in my heart, I thank him. He set me free. I walked over to a rose bush. I touched the petals. Life is funny. You think you're being buried, but really you're being planted. I was planted in the rich soil of Oak Ridge, watered by tears and resilience, and now, I am blooming. I am Brenda. I am an artist. I am a millionaire. And most importantly, I am happy. The wolf came to the door, huffed and blew his own house down in me. I am just here tending my garden, watching the sunrise. If you like this story of justice, share it with a friend who needs a reminder that the best revenge is a life well lived. Subscribe for more stories. Thanks for listening.